In this lesson, we're continuing our discussion of the inchoate offense of conspiracy. Specifically, we're going to focus on determining who the members are of what conspiracy. In other words, we're really focused here on determining whether we're dealing with one large conspiracy that has several members, or if we're dealing with several smaller conspiracies with fewer members. And there's a lot of reasons making this determination will ultimately be important in our analysis, and we're going to go over some of those reasons in a minute. But I do think it is worth noting off the top that sometimes we're dealing with a conspiracy where the structure is so simple there's not really any issue as to determining who the members of the conspiracy are. For example, let's say we have a brother and a sister who are conspiring to kill their father in order to get life insurance money, right? Well, in that case, it's going to be really easy to determine who the members are of that conspiracy, right? It's the brother and the sister. The brother and the sister are in a conspiracy to commit murder, right? They're trying to kill their dad to get life insurance money, right? A two-party conspiracy is usually going to be a relatively simple structure. There's not going to be a whole lot of issue in determining who the members are of that conspiracy. What we're focused on in this lesson more so is when the structure of conspiracies get larger and more complex. How do we handle that, right? And what we might call chain conspiracies and wheel conspiracies. Nonetheless, all of the principles we're going to talk about here would apply for smaller, more simple conspiracies. So we want to be aware of these, but a lot of times this can come up more so when we're dealing with complex structures of conspiracies. But again, there's four kind of major topics I want to talk about here, four reasons why making this determination, right? Who are the members of what conspiracy is ultimately going to be important, right? Number one, we have Pinkerton liability, we have the use of hearsay evidence, we have the concept of joint trials, and the overt act requirement, which we talked about in our first lesson on conspiracy in some detail. But we can start with Pinkerton liability. This is maybe the most important reason we want to know who is in the conspiracy, who is not in the conspiracy. Because ultimately, a defendant can be held vicariously liable for crimes committed by his co-conspirators, so long as those crimes are foreseeable and in furtherance of the conspiracy. And we're going to talk about Pinkerton liability in more detail in our next lesson when we get to accomplice liability. But we can recognize for now that this is a pretty serious deal for a defendant in a criminal conspiracy, right? Defendants can be held vicariously liable for crimes committed by his co-conspirators, right? So long as those crimes are committed in a manner that's foreseeable in furtherance of the conspiracy, right? We say the defendant can be held vicariously liable for those crimes. The classic example of this would be the getaway driver, right? Our perfectly well-intentioned getaway driver in some sort of bank robbery or something going on, right? Say that we have co-conspirators working together to steal money from a bank, right? They're going to go in. The plan is to not hurt anyone in this bank robbery. They're just going to go in, they're going to take the money, they're going to run out to the car, and they're going to drive away to escape, right? And the getaway driver might be like the nicest guy in the world. It's typically how these things play out. The getaway driver doesn't want to hurt anyone, thinks that no one's going to get hurt during the commission of this bank robbery, and is just going to help his friends get away, right? He's just the driver. Right, well, of course, something goes wrong inside the bank during the commission of the bank robbery, and one of his co-conspirators ends up killing somebody, right? So now we have murder committed during the bank robbery. Well, in that case, the getaway driver, who was nowhere near the proximity, right, he's outside of the bank, right? He has nothing to do, physically with the killing of this individual. He's outside the bank, but because he's in a conspiracy with the principal, the perpetrator, right, he's in a conspiracy with the party who is directly responsible for this murder. That defendant, the getaway driver, can be held vicariously liable for the murder, so long as it was committed in a foreseeable way in furtherance of the conspiracy, which would probably be easy to show in that case. So there we could have a getaway driver who was perfectly well-intentioned, didn't want to hurt anyone, didn't think anyone was going to be harmed, and now all of a sudden he's liable for murder under the Pinkerton doctrine, right? Pinkerton liability. So this is a big deal if you're a defendant, right? You don't want to be in a conspiracy that has a lot of members, right? In some of these conspiracies, there might be 100 members in a conspiracy. You could potentially be liable for all the different crimes that all these different members are committing, right? One reason why it's important for us to know who the members are of what conspiracy. It's all about who's vicariously liable for whose crimes, right? So that's one reason we'll really want to define who the members are of each conspiracy in our fact pattern for Pinkerton purposes. Next, we have hearsay evidence, and I'm not going to go too deep into hearsay. We have a lot of lessons specifically on hearsay, but one important nuance of hearsay under 801 is going to be that an out-of-court statement made by a conspirator in furtherance of the conspiracy may be used against any of his co-conspirators. Right, so we know most of the time out-of-court statements that are offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted are inadmissible as hearsay, right? Unless an exception applies or it's not hearsay under 801D1 or 801D2, right? And we know 801D2 tells us that a statement offered against a party opponent is not inadmissible as hearsay, right? In other words, we know this is why confessions made to the police can be used against a defendant, right? If a defendant goes into the police station and confesses to murder, he gets to trial, he can't say, oh, that's hearsay. It's an out-of-court statement being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. We know under 801D2, statement offered against a party opponent is admissible, right? Anything the defendant says can be used against him in court. This is read to him in his Miranda rights, right? So the same principle applies to co-conspirators, right? If a co-conspirator says something in furtherance of the conspiracy, that can be used against any of the co-conspirators. It's like every one of the co-conspirators made the statement himself, right? It can be used against any of the co-conspirators so long as it's said in furtherance, or the statement is made in furtherance of the conspiracy. Right, so, this is really bad if one of your co-conspirators kind of has a big mouth, right? If you have a defendant who, I don't know, say you have one of your co-conspirators, right? Maybe you're in a conspiracy, or we have a conspiracy that has like 10 members, right? To commit some sort of bank robbery, right? They're going to go out, they're going to rob a bank, commit a bank robbery, try to steal a lot of money. And in the process, one of the co-conspirators is really trying to recruit a lot of people. So he's at the bar, he's at the restaurant, he's talking to this waitress, he's talking to this person, just telling the whole town, right, about this plan to rob the bank. Well, all of these out-of-court statements would usually not be admissible against other people. We know those statements are admissible against the guy making them, right? That's a statement against a party opponent. But when you're in a conspiracy with that loudmouth guy, right, all of those statements he's making out of court that would usually be inadmissible are now admissible against you because that's your co-conspirator, right? You're in a conspiracy with this loudmouth guy going around telling the whole town what the plan is, right? So not a good result for the defendant. Another reason, if you're a defendant, you don't want to be in these really large conspiracies, right? If there's 100 members in the conspiracy, odds are one of them, right, is probably talking a little bit more than he should. Those statements can be used against you if they're made in furtherance of the conspiracy. One thing to watch out for here is termination of conspiracies. Generally, we say that conspiracies terminate upon completion of the criminal objective, right? So if it's conspiracy to commit murder, once the murder is complete, any statements made after that are no longer in furtherance of the conspiracy, right? The conspiracy has been completed, or the criminal objective has been completed, meaning the conspiracy is terminated. So a classic example you want to watch out for here would be back to our brother and sister example, right? Say brother and sister conspire to commit murder, right? To kill their father, to get life insurance proceeds, right? So they carry out the murder. And then 2 months later, after the murder has been carried out, the brother goes to the police and confesses, right? And so we know that's a statement against party opponent. That out-of-court statement can be used against the brother, But can that statement be used against the sister, his co-conspirator? And the answer is going to be probably no, unless some other exception applies, right? Because the conspiracy terminated at the completion of the murder, right? That statement was not made in furtherance of the conspiracy. When the brother goes in and confesses to the police officer, he's not doing this in furtherance of the conspiracy, right? The conspiracy terminated when the murder was carried out. So because the statement was not made in furtherance of the conspiracy when he confesses to the police officer, right, it's not going to be admissible under this rule against the sister. So we do want to look out for situations where the conspiracy has already terminated. Statements after that point, right, this rule will not apply because the statements are no longer being made in furtherance of the conspiracy. Next up, we have the idea of joint trials. This is again another reason if you're a defendant, you don't want to be in these large conspiracies that have a lot of other members, right? Because generally, prosecutors prefer to bring all co-conspirators to trials in a single proceeding, rather than to prosecute each conspirator in separate trials, right? The idea here is really more so from a strategic perspective. Right, if you're a defendant, it's going to be hard to differentiate your story, yourself, from your co-conspirators when you're all in trial in one proceeding, right? If you're the getaway driver, the jury's hearing all the evidence, right? It's going to be hard to differentiate yourself from your co-conspirators when you're being lumped into one position, into one proceeding, right? So just something else to keep in mind, that generally prosecutors are going to bring all the co-conspirators to trial in a single proceeding. And this can be a tough outcome for some of the more quote-unquote innocent co-conspirators to the party, right, or to the action. Of course, also we have the overt act requirement, which we talked about in our last lesson. In jurisdictions that require an overt act, a single overt act by any member of the conspiracy is sufficient to prosecute every member of the conspiracy. So we talked about this in our last lesson, but again, another reason it's important to know who the members are of what conspiracy. All the prosecution has to show is that any of the members committed the overt act, right, to prove the overt act requirement. So if you have 100 members in a conspiracy, you're probably going to be able to find an overt act from at least one of these members. Really small conspiracies, this might be hard to show in certain situations. You only have two parties, two members of the conspiracy. It becomes more difficult for the prosecutor to find that overt act. 100 co-conspirators, you're probably going to be able to find some stuff between all of these members, right? So another reason it's important to know who are the members of what conspiracy. Prosecutor in jurisdictions that require an overt act, right? It's going to be important to know who the members are of what conspiracy in determining that overt act, because a single overt act by any member will be sufficient to prosecute every member of the conspiracy. Okay, so these are kind of our big concept ideas as to why it's important, why we want to know who the members are of what conspiracies. Again, maybe the most important is Pinkerton liability, right? This is something we really want to be aware of, but we want to know, we want to be cognizant of all of these as we kind of work through criminal law fact patterns. So how do we determine who the members are of a conspiracy? Thank you so much for watching this video preview of our Legal Education Accelerator Program, or LEAP for short. If you would like to see the conclusion of this video and gain full access to our entire 1L and 2L video library, integrated outlines, streamable audio versions, additional practice exams with explanations, and much more, we invite you to head over to our website and join the thousands of law students who have already enrolled. To get started with your no-risk free trial today, simply click the link in the description box below or visit www.studicata.com/leap.
Hi everyone, my name is Serena and I'm currently a law student at South Texas College of Law, Houston.
Hi everybody, my name is Shiva and I'm currently a law student at Southwestern.
Hi everyone, my name is Michelle and I am a first year student at South Texas College of Law, Houston. I used the Studicata study video series last semester to help me prepare mostly for contracts, and I actually made an A+ in contracts last semester, which I greatly dedicate to the Studicata videos.
By using Studicata to help me prepare for my final exam, I was able to score the highest grade out of my class on the final and even have my essay distributed as the model answer. Not to mention I had done quite poorly on the midterm and was struggling throughout the whole course of the semester, understanding the material and keeping up with lectures.
Because of the Studicata video lectures, I was able to go into my exams with a feeling of confidence. I didn't have to worry about what the rules of law were or how I was going to organize my answer to an essay question.
I would absolutely recommend the Studicata series and their online course materials to anyone. I think that they are not like professor lectures that you might find online or other outside study materials that you may encounter. I think that the Studicata videos really focus on not only ensuring that you understand the material that you're going to encounter on your final, but they also help you to understand kind of the best method for test taking, and they really break down how to approach each problem and the best ways to tackle certain methods on testing, and I think that's really important, and I think it's really special. I don't see that anywhere else in any of the other online resources that I've found. So I would certainly recommend Studicata to anyone who is studying in law school right now. Good luck on your studying, and you're going to do great.
I would definitely recommend Studicata to anybody watching this video. Give it a chance. I'm positive that you will love it, that you will get a lot out of it, and that you will be happy that you gave it a chance. I definitely am. I know I will be using Studicata in the future.
And I cannot thank Studicata enough for getting me through my first semester of law school. I will definitely continue to watch the Studicata video lectures throughout my law school career, and I highly recommend that any future or current law student do the same.